When a talent falls off or doesn't get over in the first place, this is usually the result of a combination of things. They might hit a ceiling. They might be good, but not good enough to reach the main event. They might have had their stuff at one point, but were stigmatized as just guys over time, never to be taken seriously. But sometimes a wrestler just completely destroys their careers all by themselves. So I am Gareth from What Culture Wrestling, and these are those devastating acts of self-sabotage that ruined wrestling careers. Number 10, Marty Janetti literally rides into the sunset. When interviewed on his Dark Side of the Ring special, Marty Janetti referred to himself as GAT, God's amusement toy. He believes, deflecting accountability entirely, that God himself interferes with his life as a rib. Did God tell Janetti to steal a cop's bike and ride it into a fountain just for a laugh?
I command thee to pop the boys.
God wasn't to blame for Janetti's constant self-destructive mess-ups, but things are always more complex. Janetti endured a torrid upbringing. He also must hold the record for the most times Vince McMahon has fired and rehired a talent. And since he was never a huge star, that says a rather lot about how gifted Janetti was. On his day, he was an outstanding babyface worker capable of making anybody look good. He was fired even before the most famous rockers run because they partied too hard and made a spectacle of himself. Then God got him suspended and fired variously for resisting arrest with force and possession of drugs, being in no condition to perform at the 1993 Royal Rumble, and ending in jail 1 week after reuniting with Shawn Michaels in 2005. If it weren't for that ruddy God, Marty would have been employed for about as long as anybody. Number 9, CM Punk detonates a pipe bomb in a room by himself. There was no reversing the events of Brawl Out. The Elite did not want to work with CM Punk. Still, as the lead man on a brand new primetime Saturday show, Punk was made, to such an extent that AEW Collision doubled as a psychiatric test of sorts. A more or less foolproof system was devised to pacify him. As was always the case, Punk was allowed near full creative control over the direction of his character. Every word he said was a word he wanted to say. He tagged with close friends FTR in several matches, some of which had no real storyline purpose because he wanted to tag with his mates and was allowed to because he was the star and effectively co-booker of the show. He held near complete dominion over Collision, and in the meantime the Elite re-signed and agreed to leave him to it. And then he banned certain people, even the head of talent relations, from appearing on it. He demanded certain things not happen on his show. He then stupidly buried Hangman Adam Page out of nowhere in an off-air promo too. He had everything and left himself with nothing. And that's before he stepped foot in London. Number 8, Ultimate Warrior's entire career. The self-destruction of the Ultimate Warrior was infamous because it was a phenomenally mean-spirited hatchet job. At the time, WWE had entered the DVD market and produced a series of glowing career retrospectives to basically monetize the legacies of its biggest stars after they could no longer draw money in the ring. The Warrior was an exception though. As you can probably infer from the title, WWE told the story of a lunatic flash in the pan whose incoherent rambling had dated horribly, was a reckless buffoon, and was such a crap-disturbing narcissist that over time he became unemployable. As nasty as it was, this was a case of you're not wrong Vince, you're just an a-hole. The Warrior did self-destruct. As the old saying goes, an irredeemable piece of crap is right twice a day, and Warrior was right to defend himself and demand the money he felt was owed to him at SummerSlam 1991. He self-destructed further when phoning in a run in 1996 that was bizarre even by his standards. He did make it back into the fold in 2014, just prior to his untimely passing, but a terrible 1998 WCW run lowered his stock to an unrecoverable extent, and his proto-alt-right BS on the college speaker circuit exposed him as a rancid human being who you can't believe you ever supported. Number 7, Austin Aries goes into business for himself. The greatest man who ever lived gimmick was no gimmick. Most great wrestlers beat themselves up when they work a phenomenal match even without an overt botch because they could have executed something more crisply. Austin Aries would smile and say, "Ha, no notes." In his defense, he was really great at his peak. He had a great mind for crafting an elegant, worthy main event match without ever compromising how exciting his stuff looked. He was also an abrasive a-hole to many of his colleagues and would even invade their personal space if they dared get his name wrong. He always received a strong push because he was so good, but he wasn't so good that he could go into business for himself and get away with it. He infamously no-sold Johnny Impact's finish at Bound for Glory 2018. And while he claims it was a worked shoot, look at his cage match record after the fact. Number 6, Buddy Landell couldn't exercise his demons in time. If you have a spare 4 minutes, go and watch this specific promo in the link on your screen. It's cut by Buddy Landell, the Great What If, ahead of a co-promoted show between the WWF and Smoky Mountain Wrestling, on which he was to challenge Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title. It's an expository glimpse into his life and career, or rather what it should have been. It's no sob story, and that's the beauty of it. He takes full accountability for his mistakes. He promises his hometown that he'll do everything to get it all back. He told that story because it was true. He was hired and fired by every promoter of renown in the land. His nickname in the business was No Show Budrow. He was so effortlessly brilliant that wrestling historian Bo James said when assisting Dave Meltzer with his obituary, he was so good and so natural at what he did that sometimes I think he got bored with it. He died aged just 53 in 2015. Number 5, Tessa Blanchard bullies and belittles countless female wrestlers. Tessa Blanchard had the world at her feet and literally, by all accounts, spat on its face. She had an in to the business, being the daughter of wrestling royalty Tully Blanchard, and she could not have broken through at a more opportune time. She debuted in 2014, just 1 year before WWE was pestered into giving a damn about women's wrestling. She was a precocious talent who turned heads with her distinct dynamic powerhouse game when the demand for high-end women's wrestling was stronger than ever in the North American market. The conditions could not be more favorable. Why then isn't she one of the biggest stars in wrestling? Because she alienated entire locker rooms with her entitlement and arrogance, was by several accounts impossible to deal with, and even, as Alison Kay alleged, spat in a black woman's face in Japan and called her the N-word. Yep, that'll do it. Number 4, Robbie McCallister literally crosses the line. WWE is an organization so baffling, with an internal code so slippery, that it has compelled many former talents to question their own sanity. You are meant to have a passion for and a sacred respect for the business. If you don't, get ready to learn the Undertaker's annual liquor store order, buddy. But don't be a mark for it. Love wrestling and dedicate your life to it, but don't enjoy it, a-hole. WWE has marketed itself as above wrestling, and by proxy every wrestling company to have ever existed. Really, since he has creative credit in shockingly few of the most successful WWE acts, that was Vince McMahon's biggest masterstroke. Robbie McCallister was an undercard tag team guy in WWE who made the very stupid decision to not just enjoy wrestling as a punter, a mark as WWE doubtlessly had it, but to do so at the competition. And then TNA only went and filmed his Impact Zone appearance. Robbie lost his WrestleMania payday as a result, but reckons he was subconsciously trying to get fired. Number 3, Dave Schulz slaps himself. Because it makes for a better story, the Dark Side of the Ring episode covering the downfall of Dave Schulz portrayed him as the great lost worker of the 1980s, who was blackballed from the wrestling industry. Neither of these things are true. They're somewhat close to being true, but embellishment is part of wrestling. Schulz was a fantastic promo, intersecting menace and black comedy to tremendous effect. He was also mean, a quality so lacking in modern wrestling that it is romanticized through the lens of nostalgia. However, Schulz hasn't worked a match that stood the test of time, where many people still talk fondly about the best output from the 1980s. It's true that he was suspended by the New York State Athletic Commission for slapping John Stossel, but he was bounced out of the WWF for intimidating Mr. T backstage. T had done nothing wrong. Schulz simply could not abide an outsider in the inner sanctum, and went about it in an aggressive, unjustifiable way. In other words, Schulz well and truly self-destructed. Number 2, the Brit Rest scene. British wrestling really was big in the mid to late 2010s. Insane championship wrestling sold out arenas. What Culture Pro Wrestling, later Defiant, played a not remotely insignificant role in rehabilitating the careers of Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. You are welcome. Progress, now that the worldwide scene isn't what it was in the wake of AEW's rise, was probably the last of the taste-making hipster independents. Brit Rest was booming, and WWE was so afraid of its rise that they created NXT UK when the rebooted World of Sport popped up on terrestrial telly. The rot set in when, at frankly pathetic contract offers, a lot of the best talent worked in WWE's direction. Beyond a few overpraised UK takeover events, they might as well have joined MLW for all the exposure they got. The scene was also littered with creeps and abusers, many of whom were outed in 2020. Brit Rest never recovered after the pandemic, and that was for the best really. A lot of those careers can rest in the piss that William Regal drinks. Number 1. Hulk Hogan outs himself as a racist. Perhaps a better way of putting it is that Hulk Hogan ruined his legacy. Wrestling has a horrible way of rewarding bad people. Now, statistically, a lot of people involved in it are horrible people, which helps. Consider Ric Flair. In 2021, his awful behavior was brought back into the public consciousness upon the broadcast of the Plane Ride from Hell episode of Vice's Dark Side of the Ring series. Rightly, a lot of people stopped praising his impeccable in-ring legacy. But then, wrestling happened. Terry Funk passed away in August, and his 1989 series with Flair, which was incredible, was lovingly touched upon across social media. It's nobody's fault. This is just how things go. Hulk Hogan was outed as a despicable racist, never really showed contrition, and while WWE has tried to slot him back into the legendary ambassador role, it has mercifully never taken. The responses are always mixed, but the real love has faded forever. His basic work, stunningly effective and magical through the lens of a child, doesn't hold up. Does this strengthen people's resolve to never forget? Possibly. In any event, Hogan entirely by himself has destroyed his reputation. And that's our list. Know of any other devastating acts of self-sabotage that ruined wrestling careers? Well, drop them in the comments section down below, and don't forget to like, share, and click on that subscribe button while you are down there. And if you love this sort of sabotage, then head on over to whatculture.com and find some more fantastic articles just like the one this video you're watching right now is based on. I've been Gareth from What Culture Wrestling. Thank you very much for watching today. Now go and be your best bloody self, my friends, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Bye bye!